This podcast is part of the Podcast Arcade Network.
Welcome to episode 16 of Paranormal Dads. I'm your co-host, Andy.
I'm Pat.
I'm Eddie.
And we have a very special guest with us today, Billy, who's joining us from the Daydream Instruction Manual podcast. Join us as we go in search of the world's monsters, myths, and mysteries right here on Paranormal Dads. Welcome back to another great episode, everybody. It feels like it's been a little while. I think we say that after every episode, though.
Yeah, we do, but it's all right.
Yeah.
You know, like you said, the operating word here is not just paranormal, it's dads.
To get the three of us together in the same room, the planets literally have to be aligned
Yeah.
in the correct phase
Yeah.
in order for us to be able to make this thing work. But
And this time we didn't just get three of us together. We got a special guest here. Billy, thanks for being here. I think Billy is actually a little bit of a fan, or you should say mutual admiration. You've listened to a lot of the episodes, right?
Yeah. Well, being part of the podcast arcade as a whole, I always try and support everyone, but when Eddie had let me know that he was starting a paranormal show, and we had kind of briefly met, through some of our previous events and whatnot, and I was like, wow, that sounds really cool. So I was anticipating it, because I always loved this stuff. I'm a big horror movie guy, so I just always enjoy the idea of this kind of thing. Bigfoot is like totally real to me and all that. So a show about that, that's part of the network. Yeah, I was really excited. And now I'm a dad, so I can be on the show.
You fit all the criteria.
When he says he likes the paranormal, guys, I'm looking at his forearms, and he has tattoos of skulls and pumpkins and Chucky and all sorts of good stuff. So believe it, he's not just blowing smoke. He actually likes the paranormal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Actually, none of us are sporting tattoos of that, so we're a little behind the game, guys.
Well, you have a flaming soccer ball.
Well, I do have fire. We just need to replace the soccer ball with a skull, and I'm halfway there.
There's a skull inside the soccer ball.
Watch out, Billy. I'm really competitive, man.
I know. We
gonna have
played.
4 skulls on me by next
what did
time.
we play? We played that soccer race car game.
It was, it's Rocket League.
That one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun.
A lot of trash talking on our. It was on our podcast arcade get together Christmas special deal. Yeah, we had fun. Got a little competitive with all the video games.
Yeah.
I won. No big deal.
Came down to you and Aaron from Geek Vice, who are like the actual soccer players.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was ironic. But he was talking mad stuff too.
He's a super gamer.
Yeah.
So like.
Yeah.
He's.
No, I'm glad you're able to join us.
Yeah, no, me too.
Totally random and fun.
Yep.
And Billy's also involved with a couple of podcasts from the Podcast Arcade.
Yes, the other one is Underground Inc. That was my actual podcast that Ben and I started a while back, and so
I guess as the years go by, it just spider webs out into
yeah.
That's what Eddie does. He takes a passion and he involves everybody and ropes everybody in and makes them enthusiastic about it as well.
I'm kind of like cancer, but happy cancer.
Oh no!
I'm like
It spreads in a good way though.
Spread it out in a good way.
Yeah.
Eddie,
Speaking of cancer,
my
guys.
grandma died of happy cancer. Just kidding.
I hurt everybody's feelings.
I have all my grandmothers. So
Okay, good.
that's
Speaking
okay to
of
say.
cancer,
Oh.
how about this weather we've been having?
Oh my good.
the winter that will not end.
Talk about paranormal.
It's the middle of April, and we're still struggling to get out of like 32-degree temperatures. But I have something coming up next that will put you in the right frame of mind to take that road trip, to hit out on the road, trek out, do a vacation this summer, enjoy
warmer?
some warm weather.
Ooh.
And that's all coming up next.
Are you dropping a teaser for the first segment, Pat?
Are you segueing?
I'm segueing.
It seems like Pat's pulling off the paranormal highway to our next stop.
Here we go. We're easing into recent sightings.
So this summer, you need to take a trip. You need to get away. These are the best cities for UFO sightings.
Oh,
This is data pulled from a book. It's called UFO Sightings Desk Reference, United States of America, 2001-2015. And it was written by Cheryl Costa and Linda Miller Costa. I believe it just came out last fall. And so they basically are covering all kinds of aspects of UFOs in the United States and sightings and things that have happened.
cool.
So one of the things they broke it down into were the top 25 cities to spot a UFO in. Coming in number 1, any guesses?
Omaha.
Ooh,
No.
I don't know. Do we go with number 1, or do we,
You want to back it off? We can go the other.
Go the other route. I number 1, I am going to say...
Well, let's guess and then we'll see.
I'm going to say
At the end.
Sedona, Arizona. I'm just going to throw it out there
Okay.
because it's so obscure.
And it's close.
Am I close?
You're close.
I'm in the
Oh,
ballpark.
is it Roswell?
No.
I'm sticking to Omaha. I'm not going to be fair weather.
Phoenix, Arizona, number 1.
Ooh.
Well, you got to figure, the Phoenix Lights
Phoenix
event
Lights.
in 1997 was a big one. We talked about that. We have a whole episode on that.
We do.
And then ever since that happened, residents of Phoenix and the surrounding counties have been very diligent about reporting UFOs. Recently, just like a couple months ago in the middle of February, there were 2 commercial pilots flying over the Arizona desert that claimed they saw a UFO pass overhead as they're at like 37,000 feet.
Yeah.
So they were up there a ways, and according to a radio broadcast released by the FAA between the pilots and air traffic control, you basically get the give and take between the pilots and the air traffic control about what was going on. So you got first you hear the pilot come on. He says, "Was anybody above us that passed like 30 seconds ago?"
Going 4 billion miles an hour.
And the air traffic controller says negative, and the pilot says, "Okay, well, something did." And then all of a sudden you hear somebody say, "A UFO!" And then they're kind of laughing. But it wasn't clear if it was the air traffic controller who said that or if it was a pilot who said that. And just minutes later, the FAA controller alerted an American Airlines plane that was flying in the area. He says, "American 1095, let me know if you anything passes over you here in the next 15 miles or so." And then a short time later, the pilot radios back, and he says, "Yeah, something just passed over us. I don't know what it was, but at least 2,000 to 3,000 feet above us. Yeah, it passed right over the top of us." And so, the FAA released all this. It's unclear whether it was spotted, if it was a UFO. But
I guess by very definition it would be, though, right?
I mean, it is.
It's
Yeah,
unidentified.
Whether
it
it's
was.
alien aircraft.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the weird thing is, why did they release it? Because, in the past, they're so secretive about it. Pilots, they discourage them from stepping forward even if they do see something. How come with this, they're like, "Oh, hey, general public, there's something in our airspace. We had no idea what it was." What's the difference now that they're so open all of a sudden?
And the interesting thing is this only happened, this was like February 24th of this year, 2018. So it's fairly recent.
Yeah.
I
They
wonder
didn't
if
sit
it's
on it for a while.
a deal of like, and it's almost the way things work, like just news wise anymore, and not to get like on like a political or a scandalous, type of thing, but like pretty much if you don't just come right out saying something, if someone else announces it later,
Then you're still hiding something.
It's
yes,
going to get out.
So then it's like, yeah,
We're almost in a different era of news. Where
like it's going to get out, and now your screwing over the public or something.
Right.
Well, and you think about how many scanners are out there, people listening to air traffic control,
Oh, yeah.
communication, and even on the web you can listen to radio.
Well, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of, I suppose they'd be considered, like the wackadoodles who are like always on their ham radios, like, I need to find out if there's anything going on. And
Tinfoil hat guys.
You got the
Right.
tinfoil hat
And
guy
I'm-
with, for his dog.
But
Spark is
they're
on,
obvious,
too.
especially like in an area like that. I mean, number one sighting in the country area. Like you're gonna have those people who are trying to figure out at all costs
Right.
what's going on.
And number 2 on the list was not very far away. Las Vegas, Nevada.
Really?
And it's interesting since Las Vegas is constantly lit up.
Yeah.
And there's so much light pollution in that place. It's interesting that there's still a lot of UFO sightings in Las Vegas. Of course, not very far away from Area 51.
Very close. The Las Vegas airport actually flies commercial jets of employees at Area 51. They're called Janet flights. They don't have regular numbers. It's not like Flight 9510. They're called Janet flights. Janet 1, Janet 9, Janet 12.
I wonder why Janet.
I don't know. Nobody knows. And then they go into Area 51, so it can't
You were
be a long
saying
flight.
employees
yeah.
of Area 51.
And they're not even secretive about it. They're like, yeah, we're government workers. We're going to the military base over yonder. But it's weird. So it must be really close if that's the nearest airport that flies into Area 51 from civilian territory.
I was just going to quote Rocky Horror Picture Show. You ever see that movie?
Oh, yeah, I have, but I don't know the Janet reference. Oh,
Damn it, Janet.
Damn it, Janet.
I love you. It's so interesting. I think we've all, on some level, have been to Vegas, right? Like, all of us have been there, at least once.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Andy, not once. Nope. Andy's like,
Not yet.
What's this Vegas I hear so much about?
Maybe this year, though.
It is, so I've gone there for work a ton, and, I mean, obviously, the Strip and all that is what it is, but even when you get into the city and my big thing was the surrounding areas, and it's so hard not to let your environment, like play tricks on your brain.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
But like as a guy who grew up on the East Coast and now has lived in the Midwest for 20 years, being out there, it looks so different than anything you've ever seen. Just the notion of miles of desert and just the climate, everything is so different. It's very
for people, like me who spent most of his life in the Midwest, going out there, it's like you're on an entirely different planet.
Yeah.
It's so different looking.
Yeah, just the
It's cool.
Oh, it's very cool, but it's almost right for your imagination to take over, especially as the sun is setting and you're in the desert and you're looking out amongst all this
Right.
weird stuff. And
The mountains kind of become silhouettes.
yeah. No, so I mean, it's very interesting. I would love to spend some time in those areas and do some hunting, some alien hunting.
Alien hunting. So Vegas is number 2. Would it have anything to do with the fact that there's a really loose, open containment laws? And a lot of inebriated people walking around the Strip. Would that have anything to do with it?
A little.
There are a couple pretty cool museums in Vegas for like a lot of that stuff, Area 51 type things and UFO sightings and whatnot that totally worth going and checking out.
I think they really embrace the culture too. There, I mean, you see on the Travel Channel and whatnot, they have, Area 51 and Roswell expos and right in Las Vegas, all the time. So they truly kind of embrace that.
So
So I
it's
guess
close by and, it's touristy. And,
yeah.
Number 3 was kind of a surprise to me. It's up in the Pacific Northwest. Which,
Portland?
Home to Bigfoot. So, they got their Bigfoot during the day or, in the woods. Then at night, when the stars come out, they can look up and see a UFO. But Seattle, Washington was number 3.
Don't they have legalized marijuana there?
They do. And they have a good view to look up from the Space Needle.
There you go.
Can alien and Bigfoot breed?
I don't. Well, there's some thoughts.
Bigfoot might be
there's-
an alien.
I have
theories,
heard that,
yeah.
yeah.
Like some sort of experiment let loose and see how it does.
Like, is Bigfoot the alien experiment let loose?
Yeah. That's one of the ones I read. Who knows?
Not to be forgotten, number 4, Chicago, Illinois.
Oh, really?
So home of the Cubs.
Didn't realize.
Also have has
UFO
UFOs.
sightings.
O'Hare is a huge airport.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, I think it was 2008, if my memory serves me right. But O'Hare Airport was actually shut down. There were some flights canceled, at one point in time recently, just a few years back, because there was a UFO hovering above airspace. And there's audio. If you search out there, there's audio of people, again, joking. There's something hovering above. Get a visual. Guys, air traffic controllers. Oh man, must be UFOs again. Ha ha ha. Everyone kind of laughs to save face and brush it off. Some people actually got photographic evidence, and the thing shot off, and it was kind of weird, but it punched a hole through the cloud cover and left like a donut-shaped hole in the cloud cover.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And there was more than one flight that was actually canceled or rescheduled that day because they wouldn't let flights take off because they didn't know what that was. But the weird thing, all these cities that you're mentioning, Pat, they're big, huge cities. So are they going per capita or just in total, and that's why it's the bigger cities?
It has to be total amount of sightings.
It would have to be,
Yeah,
right?
I didn't dig into the book too much, so I don't know what their criteria was, but they also break it down by state, but yeah, the majority of the list are very large cities. Number 5 was Portland. There's your Portland.
Ah!
You got Los Angeles in it. Number 6,
weird.
Tucson, San Diego, Houston, Denver, Austin. It's funny, you get down to number 14, it says Springfield. It doesn't tell you which Springfield. Well, that's what I'm thinking. The Simpsons Halloween special, there's a UFO sighting on that every year.
Yeah, the two slobbery alien guys.
I love those guys.
But do you have any idea how many Springfields there are?
Oh, God.
Aren't there like
we
12?
have.
Where's one in Nebraska?
Yeah.
Out of the 50 states, there are 28 Springfields.
There's
cities.
more Springfields than there are
There's
states.
a Springfield in 28 of the states.
That's hilarious.
So, but just in the little, trying to clear that little question up for myself, I think they were talking about Springfield, Illinois, which is near Chicago, which
suburb
was also getting a lot of sightings. So, but yeah, Dallas was number 25 on the list. They kind of rounded it out. Kansas City, 26. That's probably the closest one for
to what
us
we got.
here in
When
Omaha.
are we going to Kansas City, boys?
So we
do
head
it.
down to Kansas City, get some barbecue, go out,
Camp out in the
sit on the
open
cars,
fields.
look up at the
Exactly.
sky, and
Catch
see
a
what we
Royals
see.
game and catch some aliens.
So,
Not to speak out of turn, but one of our other fellow podcasters from the Podcast Arcade, John of Geek Vice, has a UFO sighting and he's not a big, he likes this stuff, but he likes it in a way, but this is a bona fide, and he can't wait to at some point share his story.
Well, yeah,
with us.
he's had that and ghost things.
Ghost stuff
happen,
too, yeah. But the thing about this stuff that gets me to this day, and I've gone on, this is like me, my manifesto again, is you have everything shy of an actual craft at this point. I mean, so many accounts of people who have everything to lose for talking about it. Everything unto being just thought of as being foolish, up unto losing their jobs.
Yeah.
It's just I don't understand at what point do we start really breaking this down as it just eats me alive.
Well, that O'Hare story, Andy, that's the one that really gets me because they would not just shut down an airport for no reason.
right.
Yeah.
For a hunch of, that's a big thing.
And I believe it was 2012, if I think of the year correctly. The same thing happened at one of the busiest airports in China. I couldn't begin to pronounce it, but again, they shut it down, canceled flights. There was even better photographic evidence captured of that. Looks like a cigar-shaped thing in the sky, just lit up, rows and rows of lights. It has a spotlight shining down. No wings or anything like that. It's just a cylindrical object up there. Clear photos, and whatever it is, you can tell it's not from this Earth.
Wow.
And not only that, you're talking, those are photos from, quarter mile away perhaps, but you have hundreds, if not thousands of cases around the country of people who have seen UFOs so up close that they could literally walk up and touch it. So, you're to the point where you're beyond mistaken identity and, it's not mass hallucinations or anything like this. I agree, Eddie. It's at one point do we say, okay, they're there, what are they and how do they get here? So
I've told you this story when we did, so the Podcast Arcade, once or twice a year we'll do a paranormal week before Paranormal Dads actually became a thing. And we've done Bigfoot
and
we've
Alien
done
Week.
Alien Week.
Yep.
So during my Alien Week, our Alien Week, my story was I used to have band practice late at night, and I would be getting home at like 2, 3 in the morning. So, it's, at its peak of darkness, not many people out. And the way that I live in Carter Lake, so at least for you guys, it's on the way to the airport and whatnot. And there is a back road that is like an industrial road that is like where all like the trucking companies and stuff are at. And I don't know. It's one of those things like you try to come up with a reason why it's not real, because how could it be? But and the only thing I can come up with is it was really, really late, and I could have just been tired and just saw this thing. But I saw a saucer type thing, like maybe about the size of like a helicopter, and I watched it like lower, like hover into like one of these truck bays behind fence. And like, yeah, yeah, I know.
Insane.
And like it had like lights and stuff on it, and I'm just like, there's no way that I just saw that. Like, I could have gotten out of my car and walked up to the fence to see what I was looking at, and I don't know why I didn't. Again, it's like you're in that moment of like,
Huh?
There's no way that I just saw that.
Right.
But
And plus, it's 2 or 3 in the morning, and you're tired, and you're like, "Oh man, I got to wake up in a few hours."
Yeah,
Right.
and like I had to go to work, like wake up at 6 to go to work and
Yeah.
stuff. So I'm just like, and at that point, like I'm so close to home, so I'm just like, whatever. And still to this day, I'm just like, man, like shoulda, woulda, coulda. Like,
Yeah.
should I have gotten out?
It's so
and
funny
looked?
how...
Well,
But-
it sounds like it was kind of a weird trajectory too. It wouldn't have been a plane coming down because
Oh no,
it was at
no.
a
This
sharp angle.
was, literally like from where we're sitting to like your street.
Right.
Like it's
So
not.
you're talking 100 feet away.
Yeah,
150
yeah. Not.
feet
It
away,
wasn't
yeah.
like a mile away. It was like I drove like right by where this was landing, and it's
How big would you say it was if you're just
like I said,
guessing?
like around the size of like a helicopter.
Wow. So not a drone, not even in the ballpark.
Oh
of a
no,
drone.
no.
A drone's
I mean,
like,
and this was over 10 years ago, so
there wasn't even
there
that many
wasn't
drones
drones
out.
I mean,
like
I will say the biggest, we operate drones at work, and the biggest drone I've seen is about the size of this table.
Yeah.
And
those are
Which
new
is
ones
like
too.
maybe
Yeah.
4 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no like propellers or
No,
anything
no
like
propulsion,
that.
no view.
Well,
Oh.
drones aren't always quiet either. A lot of them are pretty loud.
They're all loud.
If you were that close, like 100 feet away, you would have heard
I
a
don't
whirl
recall
or a zip or
hearing
something. Yeah.
much. If
It's
anything.
so funny how fast our brains go to that, like,
it had to
I gotta
be
go
fake.
home.
And I had to go home.
it had to be fake
So-
or it had to be real. That's where you're at on this.
Well, no, that's what
Oh,
my
in your
mind
brain.
was
Yeah,
at
yeah,
that
yeah.
time. It's like this. No way. I did not just see that. But
We do that so
anyway,
much.
That's my quick little UFO story.
Wow.
Well, there you go, people. Recent sightings. It's warming up. Plan your road trip. Go out. Find yourself a UFO.
So Carter Lake, number 26 on the list then?
27. Kansas City was 26.
Okay.
27, Carter Lake.
There you have it, people.
Keep looking up.
It's time for pop, culture, and the paranormal.
I've watched these movies a handful of times, and I watched one recently. The Hills Have Eyes. The basic premise is so back in like what was it, the 40s or 50s
Yep.
in the Nevada deserts, the government was doing these A-bomb testings, and they had these old houses
Right.
with like. Like the stereotypical, like
Yeah.
the woman in the Sunday dress is in the kitchen and the kids are like playing in the yard and whatever, but they're all mannequins.
Right.
And they had it all. I think they had dishes in the cabinets.
Oh
and,
yeah,
and everything.
Com-
Like it
yeah,
was an
they
actual
had
house.
everything
Yeah.
set up
Creepy.
like 100% to the way a house would be at the time, so they can do their research on everything.
Right.
And then, investigate these houses to see if there was any radiation issues or whatever. So in the movie, Wes Craven did the one in the 70s.
1977.
There we
Same
go.
year as Star Wars.
Same year I was born.
So he did the first one. I don't recall if he did the second one or not. And then years later, in like 2004-ish, they did a remake, which is really, really good.
Wasn't that by Rob Zombie?
No, it's a guy named Alexander Aja.
Okay.
He's like French or something. I don't know.
He's something.
I don't know. He's a really great horror movie director, but he did that
Like
one,
all
and
French
then-
people.
Yeah. No, really, that is a thing.
Yeah.
That's
They're known for their scary movies.
Scurry.
They're known for taking things to another realistic level.
A French level.
That most people, like American, and that's a whole thing. Anyway, yes,
They're
they
known for
take
delicious crepes and
they
terrifying
take
horror.
things pretty serious.
Yeah.
So
Like their love
anyway,
stories.
yeah, so the idea, the fictionalized or not, maybe it is based off of some real myth of realism or something, I don't know. But the fictionalized story in this is that during these testings, there were actually people, vagrants or drifters or whatever.
Hill people,
absolutely.
Appalachian folk.
Excuse me.
No offense to any Appalachian folk.
Who lived out in these deserts and in the surrounding areas, and the radiation did have an effect on them. And any time that they mated, and a lot of times it's inbred, so that messes things up even more with the radiation. And all these years later,
If you take anything away from this episode, don't inbreed.
sure. But yeah, especially if you've been
It's
hit with
bad.
radiation poisoning.
Yeah.
So these people, they become like these kind of like mutated, deformed people, and they're cannibalistic.
Oh.
Well, you're not accepted in society. You're not going to go out to like the regular public.
It never makes them nicer. That's one thing I've noticed. It doesn't
Well,
make them kind and loving.
there are some
Okay.
who still have a moral compass of whatever, families driving through the desert on vacation. They got their Winnebago attached to their truck.
Mm-hmm.
They're driving through and they need to get gas. So there's only the one, crappy little gas station, with the hillbilly toothless gas station attendant who's like,
How
hey,
much money you got?
well,
Shame about your tail line.
we got thrown off the map. Which way do we go? Well, if you go through this shortcut here,
Don't do it.
and things happen and whatever. Now that's like the horror part of the
Right.
movie, but my question is you can go out to the Nevada deserts now and those houses are still standing.
Ooh. That would be really creepy. To see.
I would
Especially at
love to go out to those, and apparently you can.
They're not irradiated where you're going to walk out with.
Probably not, because you can walk around Chernobyl these days.
I'd be taking a Geiger counter with me.
I'm not saying I'd go there, but people are walking around
One
unprotected.
But did with these radiation things in Nevada or Chernobyl, did they have an effect on people? Anything like that. If
Could
you
it
go
have-
out there, are you gonna get?
I was having that thought, not so much the radiation part, but when I was flying into Vegas, you look around at all these like nooks and crannies, not to steal it from the Thomas English muffin ads, but there's so many spots people could just live.
Oh yeah,
and you would never know. You would never know. And I even saw little tiny mini lakes and ponds and all this. I'm like, that
Go up into the hills. I
Well, and
claim
that's-
this spot. This is my
mine
home.
as far as I can see.
Well, and that's what they say about the mountains and the hills around Roswell and Area 51 and all of that is if you look around properly, you can see doors, like they're like carved into the mountain, but like legit doors that you can go in, and
Well, it could happen. I'll say that there was a recent thing that came out just a couple months ago, and the details escape me. I think it might have been in Europe, somewhere in the mountains. There was I think a helicopter tour actually found this little shack on a mountainside where they were going to do a tour of rock climbing or something like that. Well, come to find out that a family had been living there completely cut off from society for 20 or 30 years. And I don't remember if there might have been some inbreeding going on, because they said some of the younger people, they did have very noticeable deformities. Their place was absolute dump, very unsanitary conditions. No phone, no electricity, no internet, no toilets, no running water.
Wait.
Completely
no
cut
internet?
off.
Did I hear that right?
Yeah. What? Forget the toilets. No internet. Kind of get a Wi-Fi hotspot.
What kind of hell is this?
So it can happen.
Sure.
I mean, and if it had, you think the government's going to make a press release about that?
no,
No. So the scary part about that movie is the what ifs, and I guess you could say that about a lot of scary movies, maybe.
Sure.
But just the title even always creeped me out. The
Yeah.
Hills Have Eyes. Ooh.
But you'd never know. I mean, if you were like doing a test like that, you would do your due diligence, I guess, to make sure there wasn't a populace, but you wouldn't necessarily be able to make sure nobody is there. So, I mean, technically, there could be a person living on the outskirts of an area that got nuked.
Well, and that kind of stuff. I mean, even here in Omaha, we have
Nuketown, yes. I don't know.
No. I'm just saying, as far as like allegedly people living in like rural areas, like so we have we have Hummel Park. That is
Fontenelle Forest, places like that.
Well, Hummel Park is alleged to have
mole people?
no albinos.
Yeah.
Thank you. I can.
Sorry, I'm laughing.
Like this is where.
No offense to any pale skinned people out there. If you knew how pale I was, you would take offense.
I thought Billy was an albino.
That's a whole thing that
The albino cannibals in Hummel Park.
Well, I don't know if they're cannibals. Maybe that's another thing.
I heard they were cannibals.
Only Andy's legs are albino.
But anyway, and that's not part of the whole pop culture thing. But it is a thing. Like when you start thinking about, like you said, the what ifs. Like, wow.
This ties in loosely to your thing, and it will allow me to segue into mine. There was a urban myth. This is not in Omaha, and I want to say it was in Illinois somewhere. Someone look this up.
Springfield.
It was in Springfield.
One of the 28.
Triple jinx on that one. So, but this was a legit. It made it into the news, and this is where I fall apart with my my sourcing. But just look this up, people. Don't be lazy.
That's what your job was supposed to be.
Exactly. Was that looking it up?
Yeah.
Pat's our research and fact guy.
Exactly. But yeah, Pat's research. He's the R&D.
Yeah.
And I phoned it in this week.
Exactly. But there was an urban myth in this community of this forest man who would walk in and like steal stuff. And it was a persistent like urban myth. It was going on for 20 plus years, where there was this forest man that would come in and steal things.
Kids, you better bring in your toys, because the forest man might come and take them away.
It was a legitimate, like, hey, the forest man, ooh, look out. And it turns out it was absolutely true. A man was arrested breaking into someone's home, and not even breaking in. He would find houses that were unlocked, and would walk in and would steal things that people would not necessarily notice missing. He made it a very specific point not to steal like TVs and stuff. He would take like batteries or an apple, like a single piece of fruit.
Things that he needed for living in the
things
forest.
that he absolutely needed to subsist, but he wouldn't go and just steal like whatever. He had a specific like living purpose he was doing. This guy he graduated. He wasn't much older than us. He was like in his like late 40s, early 50s. This is recent. He graduated high school in the 80s or whatever, and was like, I'm not ready to go into the world. I don't have a plan. I don't have anything. Literally took a tent, went into the forest, and decided he was going to live in the forest.
That's what he did.
Wow.
Just lived in the forest. And found enough of a deep pocket that nobody knew he was there. And over time, nobody bothered to keep track of.
Thing.
And it was his thing. And he literally would get into town during the day when people were at work and would take just enough stuff from different houses so he could subsist. And at his campsite, they found like a grill and all this stuff. The dude literally had a campsite that he was living on. So in their case, the forest did have eyes, because it was a guy just, they're going to work. I'm going. Woo! Apples, batteries, good for the day.
A lot of it may have been outdated, like from the 80s, but...
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, is that my camcorder?
I hope the Apple wasn't.
yeah, exactly.
Vintage 1987 Apple.
So I wonder what happens to this guy. You know, he goes to court. Does he go to jail or not? If he gets kicked loose, does he go back to the force?
Yeah,
Go
I don't
back
know
home?
what
They
a guy
probably
like
put him in like some sort of like halfway house or like mental, like
Yeah, that
I mean,
could be, yeah.
I don't know. Like it's not like he's like stable enough to go out into the real world.
I mean,
or
he
something,
avoided
so-
detection for 20 plus years. He only stole enough that would be inconvenient to people, not really like hurting anybody ultimately.
But at that point, going back into the real world would be like an institutionalized person going back into the real world. It reminds me
Right.
of, was it Red from Shawshank Redemption?
Yeah.
Spent his whole life in prison. When they cut him loose, he didn't know how to get a job. He didn't know how to...
Right.
The world changes so much after a couple decades, you really don't fit in anymore.
So that's what I would think is
Yeah.
it almost, if they don't want him doing that, like, and he's not doing something terrible enough to go to prison, like,
Right.
If he's
they'd
stealing
almost have
apples.
to
and-
institutionalize
I just feel like
him.
he's been going on this long and nothing is really bad for it. Just let him live in the forest.
Yeah.
But then you have everybody living in the forest.
Yeah, like, just let them know, like, on Thursdays you can go to the local church for their food drive.
Exactly.
There you go.
Maybe that kills the whole vibe for him, though. Maybe that was the whole thing he liked. Like, you don't even know.
That's like caging a tiger and making it, quote unquote, hunt for its food in its enclosure.
There's
Like, it's just not the same.
There's a goat tied to a rope in the corner. He's gonna hunt.
Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park, yeah.
But segueing into my thing, which is kind of a rough one, but there was a talking about things in the past a little bit. There was a show in I think it was the early 50s called Lost in Space. And it was intentionally kind of cheesy and campy and all those things. And
You could be back then. You could get away with that easier, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, even then they tried to do kind of like serious science fiction and even in a way horror too, Billy, like The Creature from the Black Lagoon and all these things. And then you get away from some of the more serious stuff into the more like fun, quote unquote, fun stuff. And so Lost in Space was more of a fun family show, kind of like, it had that Robbie the Robot, Danger Will Robinson, Danger.
Right.
And so the whole premise for people who may not know this was it's a family, the Robinsons, that were launched into space. And it's one of those things that, like, as a TV concept, it was kind of like, well, how cute is that? It's a family in space, but the logistics of like, man, how does a 10-year-old qualify to be in the astronaut program? That's pushing it a little bit, but but for a show in that era and for the type of show, they didn't really sweat the details on that. It was like, they're a family in space, run with it, and so they did. I don't remember how many seasons it was on or anything like that, but it was one of those things that pop culture wise, it did kind of like, if it already wasn't at a peak, it really helped kind of push a lot of that, I say cheesy, but just science fiction in general kind of into the next level for people, because unlike like Twilight Zone and a lot of the more heady, like thinking stuff, this was much more entertainment, just kind of pure for your fun. Well, there was that, Lost in Space. A few years back, and maybe want to say 10 years ago, there was a movie based on it that had Matt LeBlanc in it from Friends.
Why do we laugh?
I don't know why.
I don't know either.
I just pictured Joey.
Joey.
Like, why am I in space? Could I be wearing any more spacesuits? How you doing? How you doing, alien? Danger.
Hey, danger, Will Robinson. How you doing?
So they did the movie, and I think it was okay. I don't think it like blew anybody's hair back necessarily, but there was that. Well, now they have relaunched and redone.
Pun intended.
Exactly. Oh,
Oh, yeah.
We need a pun alert button. Lost in Space. And for all of you people listening who have Netflix, I highly recommend it. It's a very fun show. And it does ride that line. It's not campy, so they got rid of the campiness. It's a little more serious in tone, but it's very much like family safe entertainment. Like it's that nice right down the middle of it has enough adventure and enough peril that people like adults are invested, but kids aren't like freaking out. There's no like gore or excessive violence. It's enough that a family could definitely crowd around and watch
Language
it.
is cool.
Language is totally on par. There's nothing. I don't think there's any swearing in it at all.
You can tell the dad part of the Paranormal Dad coming out here. Right?
We're betting it right now. Like, okay, make sure. But thoroughly entertaining. And the part that's neat is that they sneak little tidbits from kind of the campiness of the show into it. So it's not campy, but they do definitely tip their hat to the source material for it. But yeah, super fun show. Can't recommend
Word of the
it
day,
enough.
campy.
Campy. Don't go on a camping trip. Go on a campy trip.
Well,
I've seen some trailers of it. It looks like it will be a pretty good show.
Oh.
Check it
And
out.
I know some people who had been fans of the original, and when they were starting watching this one, because I think they were expecting the campiness, they said it took them like a good 3 or 4 episodes to kind of like, oh, is this? And then they're like, okay, yeah, it's actually really good.
Yeah. One thing that they did do that I like for these kinds of things is that they kind of explain some of the why is there a family in space? Why is this kid 10? I don't get it. And the big thing was that Earth is experiencing some sort of environmental disaster that may have been caused by some sort of like alien or foreign object entering our atmosphere, which messes things up. So families kind of establish colonies to get off planet before things get too nuts.
So they don't want them A-bomb mutants coming after them.
Well, they don't want to have the
Forest
hills.
man stealing their apples.
The space hills have eyes.
the hills have eyes in space. Yeah, so there you go, little tandem pop culture and the paranormal for you. Tag team that one.
Both barrels.
Tag team.
Woo! That was weak. Again. Yeah!
And now it's time for the main mystery.
All right, here we go. Main mystery, folks.
You had the appetizers. You had your drinks. Here comes the main course.
And for dessert, you two are going to try to high five correctly next time.
Looking at your elbow. Ow.
Oh, that was terrible.
That was not it.
Anyway, okay, so this would have been the ultimate synchronicity within a synchronicity. So we were originally supposed to record this episode last weekend. Was it last Saturday night?
Saturday evening, yeah.
Okay, and we had to reschedule due to the freak April snowstorm. Never thought I'd say that.
It snowed twice more since then.
Yeah, exactly. So we had to reschedule, but what would have been really cool is that for the main mystery, I've chosen the synchronicity between a fictional book called Futility, which was about the sinking of a large ocean liner, and it came out years before the Titanic sank in a very, very similar fashion as to what occurred in the actual book. And that was going to be the main mystery, the synchronicities between, reality mimicking fiction. And we were set to record that. Little did I know at the time, but we are going to record it on the same day in history that the Titanic actually sank.
No. What?
Yeah, it was last Saturday.
Oh, see, that would have been cool. Billy's freaked out.
You guys ruined it.
So, I mean, I knew it happened sometime in April, and then as the show was getting closer and closer, I was like, I wonder what day in April. And this was Saturday morning that we were supposed to do the show, and I was like, oh my God, it's today.
That's
Probably
crazy.
good we didn't record that night, because we would have screamed like little girls.
I know.
Once we figured that out.
Yeah, scream like,
We would've
I'm on
figured
top
it
of the
out.
world!
Paint me like you paint your French women, Jack. That's what I would have said.
So serious.
The thing, could there be a more dark name to or a more sad name to a book?
Futility. So here's the thing, though. Here's the real kicker. So the book, actually, they re-released it after the Titanic actually sank. So the original version was called Futility, and that came out in 1898. Shortly after the Titanic actually went down, they renamed the book The Wreck of the Titan, and they re-released it. sad to say, a little bit probably to cash in on some of the...
exactly.
That's like the opposite of what people do now.
Right.
Like, they scrubbed out after 9/11, on Spider-Man, they took out a scene that had the Twin Towers.
They took those out.
Like that's the complete opposite sensibility. Is hey guys, we should capitalize on this tragedy that Billy...
Back then they didn't have the question, too soon?
Yeah, too soon.
Yeah.
Well, they also had kids cleaning out chimneys back then, too.
Actually, the Titanic arrived in 1989.
Oh, you mean in pieces? From the bottom of the...
Oh, no, Ghostbusters 2.
Oh, Billy invokes the Ghostbusters. The Titanic just pulled in.
And the very odd cameo from Cheech Marin. Better late than never.
That's actually really good.
Good job.
Well, let me give you a little background here. So, The Wreck of the Titan, or Futility, it was a 1898 novella written by Morgan Robertson, and I'm pulling some of this from Wikipedia, by the way.
No, you're fine.
The story features a fictional ocean liner called the Titan.
Wow.
Very similar to Titanic.
I mean, by 2 letters.
And by the way, this was in the original story before the Titanic went down. In the original story, the boat was still called the Titan. And in the story, the fictional story, it sinks in the North Atlantic after striking an iceberg. The Titan and its sinking have been noted to be very, very similar to the real-life passenger ship, the RMS Titanic, which sank 14 years later. And so the similarities are absolutely...
Did Nostradamus write this book?
Let's see. Okay, so for example, just like the Titanic, the fictional ship in the book The Titan sank in April in the North Atlantic, and there were not enough lifeboats for all the passengers. There were similarities in size, so the Titan was 800 feet long versus 882 for the Titanic. The Titan was going 25 knots. The Titanic was 22.5. But even beyond the name, the similarities are just they're just there. So both boats were described as the largest craft afloat and the greatest works that have ever been built by men. The Titan was 800 feet long, displacing 75,000 tons. The Titanic was 882 feet long, displacing... Let's see, where am I at? Displacing 46,000 tons. So, I mean, really similar. Both boats were called unsinkable. Passenger capacity. So, the Titan, 3,000 people. Titanic, 3,000 people.
What?
Passengers on board. In the fictional book, there was 3,000 people, so it was full to capacity. The Titanic was 2,228, so almost at capacity. The speed at impact in the fictional book was 20. The boat was going 25 knots. In real life, the Titanic hit the iceberg going 22.5. In the fictional book, the time that it struck the iceberg was noted as near midnight. In real life, it happened at 11:40 p.m. The point of impact was starboard on both ships. The month was April. A little difference here. The number of survivors in the book was only 13. Unlucky number 13. The Titanic actually had 705 survivors. Thank goodness.
That's still so many people. You know there are survivors, but to hear that a majority of the people died,
it just keeps going. So the Titan.
I guess it was the ice.
Well, the Titan horsepower had 40,000 as opposed to the Titanic, which had 46,000 horsepower. Both had 3 propellers. Both had 2 masts. Number of lifeboats. The Titan, the fictional one, had 24. The Titanic had 20. Both ships were British. It's just insane. I mean, the similarities, they just go on and on and on.
Too.
Yeah. Now this boggles my mind. Did the designers of the Titanic try to mimic the book?
Makes you wonder.
But then again,
that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's why it didn't.
But then again, why would they both sink? Like, we're living in the Matrix. That's all I've decided.
You hear of these cases of, reality mimicking fiction, or a fictional movie that later, and you think about it, it happens all the time. A lot of the technology in Star Trek and even Star Wars, we're literally seeing that come out today.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've said this before, but the idea of a dynamic screen, which we've gotten so used to now, and didn't exist even 10 years ago. I mean, it's still hard to think, but the notion of a screen that changes based on your need. We had buttons that had one purpose, and then now all of a sudden it's like, oh no, first it's a phone, now it's a thing, now it's this. I mean, that idea is so nuts. When I first saw that, I was like,
I mean, you got an iWatch, you can get a phone call on your wrist. I mean, like, it's just crazy. It's like stuff that you saw in the movies that's actually happening now. So it makes you wonder, maybe on a larger scale, if, collectively, if our thoughts and projections and wishes and daydreams and fears and everything in between, maybe collectively as a human race, we send those out into the ether, and that almost paints a picture of a future event that becomes destiny.
I always just want to keep going back to pop culture things there's a movie called The Quiet Ones, and it's basically about like it's almost like telling a ghost story, and it's basically like if all of us got together and every week these people got together, and apparently it's documented cases that each week we tell the story of this person's completely fictional, but we're making it up as we go. Like, oh yeah, so this person, they died because of this thing happened. Well, and because of this, well, whatever. They just keep growing this story, and eventually it manifests into something that happens, and it's almost like a ghost is there and moving chairs around and whatever.
I've heard of this movie.
The phenomenon is actually called a tulpa.
Okay.
Is the
I figured
term
you
for
probably
that.
would know a little more about it.
And I'm not an expert at all, Billy, but there has been some documented cases, allegedly, of this group of people who are really skilled at meditation, and they were just kind of paranormal buffs. I think this is in the early 1900s. They tried to create a tulpa. I mean, they would meditate and visualize this little kind of they called it like a Friar Tuck little character, and he was like this little kind of pious gentleman, this monk like guy, and not only did it start to take on a life of its own, allegedly it got to the point where it grew out of hand, and these people could literally conjure this thing up, and he was as like you could touch it like it was a real being, like they through their constant manifestation, they brought him into existence for real. And then he got kind of cranky, and there was a whole process to get rid of him then.
That's a thing, too, people should look up. Apparently, like Alan Moore, the comic book writer, creator.
Who looks like he lives in the forest.
Yeah, who looks like a forest man.
Apples.
So he and a couple people created the character Constantine. Mm-hmm. And apparently after, I don't remember if it was before or after, but they've ran into the actual John Constantine.
Wasn't Constantine a demon hunter?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Just for people who don't know.
Yeah. So anyway, but that all goes back to what
they ran into an actual guy named John Constantine?
I don't know if I don't think they had conversations with him, but like they ran into him and like they just knew. And so did Constantine.
See, this is
but
where...
that's trying to go back to... I'm not trying to get too far off of the topic.
No,
it goes back to what you were saying, like with the Titanic, like somehow these things might manifest, and that's a whole that it's a whole nother aspect of the paranormal, which is really interesting to me.
Well, and synchronicity itself is just a really interesting topic. I was pardon me for not having all the facts on this one, but
darn you!
I know. Where's Pat when you need him?
Buford T. Squirrel's
right
disappointed.
Yeah, we do have a squirrel on our recording desk right here, by the way, everybody. We have a stuffed squirrel that Eddie calls Buford T. Squirrel. And that's a whole story in and of itself. We have a Bigfoot kind of action figure type guy here. And
if you look
Creature
replica. If you look at our webpage from 2 episodes ago, you'll see a picture of Buford T. Squirrel.
We'll feature Buford from time to time.
I'm staring down the wrong end of them right now. But synchronicity in and of itself is kind of a fascinating topic, and I honestly just kind of use this Titanic and Titan example as a kind of a launching point to talk about it. But I do think that, sometimes what we put out there to the world can become reality. There's a true case of Mark Twain, who was actually born right around the time that Halley's Comet was making its way across the sky. And he always joked, he says, I came into this world with Halley's Comet, and I'm going out with it as well. And sure enough, he was an old dude by the time he passed for the time period. I think he was like in his 70s or 80s.
Really?
Sure enough, the day after Halley's Comet passed over us, he died.
Are you kidding me?
He came in and went out. And this was decades before he said he would die when Halley's Comet went past again.
Speaking of synchronicity, and this is not a synchronicity because this was clearly done on purpose, but I never understood the connection between the Halley's Comet and Mark Twain, because there was a amazing, and I got to look this up too, claymation special that came out like in the late 80s about these two kids that were like, they came across this, like, this sounds so weird, but a time machine, or like they made a spaceship, and they are trying to catch Halley's Comet, and they end up running into Mark Twain. And I never understood the connection. I was like, why are they with Mark Twain?
It took all these years later.
It took almost like 30 years later for it to come to me. Thank you, Andy. This is why I was supposed to be your friend.
Puzzle
Friendship
piece.
over.
Friendship over. It's fulfilled its purpose.
Fulfilled its purpose.
Now, there's another case of synchronicity I heard. This is what I was just trying to research. But two of the original signers of the Declaration of Independence, I don't want to say who it is because I'll probably get it wrong and butcher it, but two of the main original signers, they happened to pass away exactly 50 years to the day after they signed the Declaration of Independence. They died on the 4th of July, 50 years later.
It was,
Pat knows this, of course.
I think it was...
I love it.
Was it Thomas Jefferson and John Adams?
That's what I was thinking, too. Okay, that's got to be it then.
Died on the same day.
Yeah.
Always have Pat with you, always.
No, but
This is
I mean,
what happened when we had him on the Christmas special.
Yeah.
If you ever saw the John Adams series
special
on HBO, I think it was. But, they go pretty far in depth about the relationship between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. And those guys were good friends, I believe, for a long time. And then they were also bitter rivals at times, too.
Yeah, they had a falling out. Yeah.
But they died on the same day, and it was the 4th of July.
Wow.
Kind of weird.
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it just makes you wonder, like, was that part of our country or maybe even the world's destiny that those guys were meant to do that? And then the universe was like, okay, you have exactly, let me check my watch, 5 decades, do whatever you want, your mission's been fulfilled, and then they're out.
It's
so
like
weird.
I forget what it was. It was like someone in Africa and someone in China, like way, way back in, old days, like with no technology, like made statues based off of like aliens that they had seen.
Yeah.
And like no reason, like roughly around the same time period.
Yeah.
No reason should they have ever or would have ever crossed paths.
No communication.
Right. And they make almost identical
Art. Yeah.
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 That like but have similar stories of
that points
this
to
creature came down from the skies, you know, and it's like
and told us this thing.
How? What? How?
Cue the Close Encounters theme. All the people creating the art of Devil's Tower.
Exactly.
Where are they getting these images in their heads that possesses them to create this art?
That's where I get so, like, there's this, and we've had this discussion before, and we need to do, like, a Paranormal Dads roundtable sometime. But, like, the notion of a certain amount of destiny over you controlling your own fate.
Right.
You know? I mean, things like that Titanic Coincidence, and I put air quotes in that, is almost like to the point where it should like rock your your thoughts on the real world. You know what I mean? Like, what? How does that even?
It was like the writer was seeing into the future,
right?
Or like he just glimpses maybe, but saw into a future where this thing was just destined to happen, and he put pen to paper.
Yeah.
How much longer was it when the Titanic happened?
I believe it said 14 years later.
Writer's still alive at that point?
I'm guessing,
Do we know if there's any, like...
He actually made a couple changes to the book when they re-released it as The Wreck of the Titan. So I believe he was still alive, and I think they at that point, again, to cash in on the
Sure.
newness of it, they wanted to include the name Titan in the title because it was so similar to Titanic. But again,
I wonder if there was, and you may not have done this research or seen it, but I wonder if, there's interviews with him like after the fact, like what,
how did it come to him?
Yeah.
Well, I wonder, knowing what I know about construction, it's like the Titanic, you're talking about from the day that book was published to the day of the wreck of the Titanic.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, that's another aspect.
The Titanic had to have been, just to build that thing, and I don't even know the exact dates, but I'm assuming you're looking at a minimum of 5 to 10 years of construction
to build
on that
it.
thing.
Yeah.
Designed from pen to paper to pushing that ship off in the water. Mm-hmm. That thing, it took a long time to build. So you're not talking about that. There's probably no way the author knew.
Oh no,
this was going to be. So the overlap between the two is much shorter, even
shorter. But I think things like this are more common than we think. And I might have my facts wrong, Eddie. But weren't you telling me that there was a video game that was set to release right around the time that the Twin Towers went down on 9/11. There was a video game about the Twin Towers that went down because the villain in the video game was going to fly a plane into it, and then it was right on the verge of being released, and then it actually happened, and they're like, we cannot launch this thing for real.
Or maybe it was an album or something.
Was it an
album cover?
Okay.
I think it was an album cover that featured the Twin Towers getting on fire or something.
And it was right on the cusp, and then it actually happened, and then
there's a lot of things
there's
around that
there's
time.
no way we can release this.
Yeah. It's so. Gosh, you just try so hard, and this is what we do as people. We want to make sense of it. It's like, how does that happen? Is it a glimpse into once again destiny versus?
Well, destiny versus free will. How's this? Try this one on for size in terms of destiny. All right. By the way, I'm reading this particular story from a book called The Weird 100 by Stephen Spignacy. One of my favorite books. It basically takes 100 different paranormal or weird or odd phenomena, and it breaks it down to the likelihood of them being real, what the believers say, what the skeptics say, breakdown of the phenomena. It's a really cool book, really neutral. True story. One day a man was riding a moped and was killed in Bermuda when he was struck by a taxi that was carrying one passenger. So exactly 1 year later, the man's brother was also killed in Bermuda by a taxi. The weird thing was that the brother was riding the same moped as his brother had been when he was killed, and he was struck by the same taxi, and not only that, but the taxi driver was transporting the same individual.
No.
A year later to the day. And
so many levels to that.
There's one more. The incident happened on the same exact street.
Yeah.
So the exact same thing, except for it was his brother.
It's all documented as this happened.
Yep.
Ridiculous.
Or how about this one? In 1911, 3 men were hanged. And I'm trying not to laugh because it's not...
It's too soon!
People got killed here, but it's just too weird. So in 1911, 3 men were hanged for the murder of Sir Edmund Barry, and the location of the hanging was at Greenberry Hill. The murderers' names were Green, Barry, and Hill.
That's so weird!
And then this one. 1883, Henry Ziegland of Honeygrove, Texas, very maliciously dumped his girlfriend, and that upset her to the point that she committed, she made a bad choice, I'll say, as a family-friendly show here. And she passed away, and Henry must have, he wasn't a nice guy. So the girl's brother blamed Henry for his sister's death and decided to avenge her death, and he tried to kill Henry. And he went to Henry's farm where he took a shot at him, but the bullet only grazed Henry's face, and then the bullet lodged into a tree on the property. So the guy mistakenly thought that he had successfully killed Henry, and then he took his own life, joining his sister in the great beyond. Henry, however, went on and recovered and went to live a full life on the farm. So 30 years after being shot at, Henry decided that he was going to take down the tree where the bullet had lodged all those years earlier. But the tree was so big that he couldn't get it down, so he used dynamite to blow the darn thing up. Well, the explosion sent his ex-girlfriend's brother's 30-year-old bullet flying through the air, and it struck Henry Ziegland in the head and instantly killed him 30 years after that bullet was intended for his head.
As soon as you said the dynamite, like, I knew, I'm like, it's going to explode the bullet into the guy's head. It's insane.
How in the world do you explain that?
Well, at least the guy didn't die in vain or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. 30
least-
years from now, man, you wait. You'll
It was
get yours.
self-inflicted rather than homicide.
Kind of
Right.
like the putt and Caddyshack, where everybody's just sitting around waiting for that ball to drop into the cup. Except it takes 30 years for the bullet to finally find its target.
Wow.
That is crazy.
That to me is almost more compelling. Like the notion of destiny, coincidence, design. I mean, all this stuff is great, but this, I think, a lot of this centers around that idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, are we truly controlling our lives, or is there a path that we're kind of put on?
You know, and there's a little bit of humor inside of Synchronicity, too. There's a true story, documented case of a statistics professor who was giving a lecture to an audience at a college, and his lecture was on statistics and probability. And just to demonstrate a very simple principle of 50-50 odds, he flipped a coin in the air, and it landed on the ground on its edge, neither heads nor tails. You know,
Wow.
what, a billion, maybe a trillion to 1 odds of actually doing that, and it did it right in front of the lecture hall.
Yeah.
It's crazy, you know. So if you listeners have any synchronicities or coincidences that you'd like to share, hit us up anytime. paranormaldads@gmail.com.
Yep.
Do you guys have any coincidences that come to mind? You know, beyond, you know, Eddie, you thought of Billy and Billy texted you a couple seconds later. That tends to happen quite a bit.
Yeah. It's hard. I struggle between, like, the notion of a coincidence versus, like, the phenomenon of deja vu. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, so for me, it's like, is this a coincidence that this is happening, or for the quick and dirty? I lived in a different part of the country, and no matter where we really moved, I never fully felt like I belonged there as a kid, and so it dawned on me as an older, still teenager, but I was going to have to go somewhere else. And I couldn't quite put words to it, but I just felt that. And I had this reoccurring dream that I would meet this one person in a different place. And she was female. And it wasn't so much a look, but it was more of like a feeling that I got when I was around this person. And I was young enough that I didn't have a frame of reference for that. I'm talking like I was like 8 or 9. And I didn't have those complex feelings of, like, you know, like more mature romance or love or anything like that. I was 8, 9 years old. And so as we moved around, that memory kind of gets tucked around. And it was basically a reoccurring dream that I would have with that. And it happened enough times that it became like not a surprise when I would have this dream. I didn't have it like hundreds of times, but probably, you know, 20 or 30 times.
Wow.
And then it just didn't. You just kind of live your life, and things kind of take over, and you don't really reference these things a bunch in your day-to-day existence. But then it was fall in Lincoln, Nebraska. I had moved here. I had lived here for about 2 years, and I was essentially dating Shireen, who then went on to be my wife. But she gets in the truck, my truck at the time. She climbs in and shuts the door, and she just kind of looks at me. And this is where I get a little bit mushy. But anybody who has been in love with anybody, you have that moment where you lock eyes, and you just kind of, your heart gets kind of mushy, and you're like, oh, you know, you're happy to see him. And that dream, everything just kind of tick, 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 like all these little like gears just locked into place. And it wasn't, to me, and this is a personal thing, and so I can't point hard facts to it. But for me, the dream made sense, and it wasn't me forcing that moment into the dream. It was more that rose to the surface right there. So whether that's coincidence or whatever you want to call that, for me it was a thing.
I thought it was going to be a little more specific, and like it instantly hit you like Shireen was the girl in the dream.
Well, I will say this: the girl in the
idea
dream
of it was, but was she what you?
She did have an article of clothing that the girl in the dream had, which was a brown jacket. And that
There you
was
go.
one thing that jumped out too.
There you go.
There was a brown jacket, and that was the thing that popped out to me as well. Anyway,
I've had all kinds of little things happen, and I'd have to dig deeper to think of like the major stuff. But like, you know, I was the job I was working for. I was driving. You drive down Curtis Street, and my boss calls. Who's named Curtis? Like right as I see the Curtis sign, the phone rings, and it's him. I'm like, why does that happen?
I remember.
So just little things like that always happen to me.
And I think people who look for them obviously tend to see it more often. When my first book was published, it was the book was dedicated to my late grandma, Frances Myers, and it just so happened that the office of my publishing company was on Francis Street. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was pretty cool and appropriate as well. Again, you know, a cold-hearted skeptic would say, "Oh, that's just chance. There's no meaning." But you know, it puts a smile on your face. There's no harm in that.
Definitely.
And years later, you're on a podcast with a guy who also grew up on Francis Street.
Hey, there you go.
I think not. Coincidence.
And I like the movie Stripes where he says, "Lighten up, Francis."
There you go.
There you
And
go.
I have nothing with Francis whatsoever.
And I'm wearing underwear with stripes on it, and
my
we just
gosh.
keep going here.
Well, one of the synchronicities, I guess you'd call it a synchronicity, that I think just about everybody has seen or heard about is the comparison of the assassination of Abraham Lincoln versus the assassination of John F. Kennedy. I mean, even my kids learned this in school. They had a discussion about it in class, and you can look it up online, and there's just all kinds of parallels between the two events. And I remember going to the bank a long time ago, like in the 80s. They actually had these cards printed up with the
stats?
like the synchronicities or the
Really?
stories between the Lincoln assassination on one side, the Kennedy assassination on the other, and glued to the little card was a penny that had, of course, the Abraham Lincoln, and then they stamped in a picture of John F. Kennedy. And I had this penny for a long time, and I've since lost it or gotten rid of it. But it'd be so cool to find one of those pennies again. That you could probably find pictures of these online, because I think it was a pretty common thing.
What were some of the similarities? I mean, I know they were shot, but
Well, for instance, Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. John F. Kennedy was elected to Congress in 1946.
Exactly 100 years.
Some of the names of Lincoln and Kennedy each contain 7 letters. Both wives lost their children while living in the White House. Both presidents were shot on a Friday. Both were shot in the head. Lincoln's secretary Kennedy warned him not to go to the theater. Kennedy's secretary Lincoln warned him not to go to Dallas.
Whoa.
It's just things like that.
That's insane.
Booth, John Wilkes Booth, who killed Lincoln, Booth and Oswald were assassinated before their trials. So, just there's a whole long list. You'll have to look it up. Snopes.com has the whole story as well.
wow.
But check that one out. If you've never heard of it, definitely something you want to look into.
Synchronicity.
Wow. And maybe we could, that could be multiple episodes right there as well.
It's a police song, too.
That song's been playing in my head this whole show.
Well, hey, Billy, thanks for being our special guest, our first guest ever on this show.
Really, yeah.
Very happy to be part of it. Yeah.
Well, Colton was here once.
Oh, that's
Colton
true.
was-
But he was a co-host kind of a thing.
Yeah.
He wasn't really a paranormal dad.
Well, no, he
true.
wasn't a
Paranormal
dad.
son.
He's a paranormal kid.
But that was also fun having him on that Hastings
No, that was really
Bigfoot
good.
episode.
That was
Paranormal
good. He did a
lad.
great job.
Paranormal lad.
Paranormal lad.
Well, hey, you can always
yeah,
contact
anytime,
us. What's our
Billy.
social
Thank
media
you.
things, Pat?
Well, you can find us on Twitter at Paranormal Dads. We're on Facebook, Paranormal Dads, and Snapchat. Oh, not Snapchat. Instagram.
Yeah.
See, I can't even keep it straight myself. But
We're dads. We don't know that young hip stuff.
We should do Snapchat. They got the little ghost.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But www.paranormaldads.com is our website. Check us out. Listen to the show. Subscribe.
Oh, and also a lot of our sound effects today were brought to you by freesound.org. Very cool website. Thanks to them for all the good stuff that they do. And thanks to all you listeners for following us. You know, we have a good little fan base there of loyal followers, paranormal enthusiasts, and just good old open-minded people. So keep your eyes to the skies in terms of seeing some strange things. Watch out for the hills that have eyes, and maybe you'll stumble upon a synchronicity or two. Hopefully it's not on a big boat.
Answering the compelling question.
Harry!
What does a stuffed squirrel's butt look like? Paranormal Dads. We're recording now. This would be outtakes?
This will be outtakes.
We are recording and we look good. So
Always look good, man.
hot dudes. Hot dads.